Right, shall we start? So, hello everyone, welcome. My name is Dean Ramsey, I'm Principal Analyst at TM Forum. I'm joined today by Andy Tiller, who's the EVP for Member Products and Services at TM Forum, and Mark Newman, Chief Analyst. I'm sure you know both of them. I'd like to say hello, chaps.
Hi everybody.
Hi everyone.
Good. So this is the first in a new series of analyst briefings that we're going to do. We're hoping to make this a regular thing. And I suspect that this series will get a little more sophisticated as we go along. So the idea is that there are a combination of detailed explanations of TM Forum activities and assets. We're going to do some panel sessions with some of the CSP architects and operator people that are part of the member community, talking about the case studies and things that they do in conjunction with TM Forum. So some of the other sessions might have the subject matter experts from within TM Forum who run the collaboration groups. So yeah, we're hoping to just kind of build this series of kind of interesting things around what's happening in and around TM Forum. I personally have been with TM Forum for about 18 months. And, one of the things that struck me before I joined was that I was aware that there were lots of interesting things happening around TM Forum, but maybe that was happening behind closed doors. And one of the things that I realize now from the inside is that those things maybe are happening behind closed doors, but there's no great reason that they should be. So these sessions are an attempt to kind of break down those walls and, give the analyst community more exposure to the things that are happening in the member community and the work going on. So I suppose when you think about TM Forum, you might think about open APIs, the standards work, the information framework, the SID, or the business process framework, which is ETOM. You might think about the collaboration groups, the labs, or even the catalysts that, they're part of the event every year in Copenhagen. So you might even think about all the analyst content that Mr. Newman and I oversee and comes out of the Inform part of TM Forum. But increasingly, lots of the interesting new stuff that's happening is around the open digital architecture, the ODA. So for many of you who were in Copenhagen this year, you might have gone over to the ODA stand and spoken to one of the subject matter experts there, got an overview. If you didn't, this session today is about the ODA, and it's kind of an intro and a taster session, and then we'll kind of dig deeper into all the things happening around the ODA, or where it's going, what the progress is being made. And Mr. Tiller is the font of knowledge for all things that's happening there. So we're going to have a Q&A session at the end, but I will keep an eye on the Q&A box in Zoom while we're doing this. So if anything pops up that's relevant to exactly what we're talking about at that time, Mark and I will try and introduce it into the conversation. So yeah, these sessions are meant to just answer analyst questions. So, if while you're watching this first one, if you have any kind of ideas about what might be a good idea for the next one, or things that you'd like to know more about, let us know. Let the CC group people who reached out to you to join this today, who do the analyst relations function for us, let them know, or reach out to us directly. We'd be more than happy to kind of accommodate some of those requests. Okay, so before we get going, Mark, is there anything else that I've missed?
No, I think we can. We've got an hour, so I think we should have plenty of time to go over anything that you'd like to talk about.
Right. So, Andy, can we start with the big question? What is the ODA?
Yes, right, Dean. I'm going to share a slide which shows you what's in the box, as it were, for ODA. So, ODA is the Open Digital Architecture. It's a collection of frameworks, codes, standards, and tools which are designed to work together to provide an enterprise architecture blueprint for a digital service provider, a modern one, a cloud-native one. And some of these components of ODA are well established and have been used by the industry for many years. So, Dean, you mentioned ETOM, the business process framework, you mentioned SID, you mentioned the open APIs. These are all very mature assets that are as relevant today as they were when they were first conceived. But ODA also includes some new things which are under very active development. In particular, what we call the ODA components, which are the software building blocks of an IT and network estate. And what's really new and different there is that the way we design, build, operate, and buy software has changed dramatically in the last short while. And so there's that, and then there's the thing we call the canvas. So we're going to talk, I think, quite a bit today about this new stuff in the bottom area, the canvas and the components, and explain what they are. But ODA as a whole is designed to be something where you begin with your business requirements in the top left box, and you express the capabilities that you need to implement your new idea, whether it's a new service or new customer experience or a new partnership. You express the business capabilities you need in business language, and then you go around the loop. You design the systems. You figure out what IT and network assets and processes you need, and it all maps together, and you end up deploying something which meets the business requirements. So that's the basic idea with ODA. You might also ask, well, what's it? What problems does it solve? What's the point of ODA? Why do we need it? What problems does it solve? And I think for analysts on the call, you will be extremely familiar with the industry's problems as you think about them day in, day out. But basically, the problem ODA addresses is that our industry has been traditionally too slow, too expensive, and too hard to work with. And ODA helps address all of those factors by making our systems and processes much more flexible and much easier to change. And systems and processes are really at the heart of everything, because when you have an idea and you want to turn it into value, the concept to cash process, you need to change systems and processes invariably. And we're not only talking about launching a new service and charging customers directly in cash. We're talking about enhancing customer experience and improving customer lifetime value, or we're talking about a concept being saving, running the network more efficiently, generating cash to the bottom line, and improving sustainability. So concept to cash is a generic description, but the point is that we used to do it in a very slow and laborious way with very inflexible systems and processes, which are very hard to change. So this process of taking concept to cash took too long and was too expensive. And also we used to do it in discrete teams. We used to have people who would come up with the business requirements, throw them over to the architects to design a system, who would throw it to developers to build it, whether that was in-house or suppliers and system integrators, and then have other people operate it. And that's just a very old-fashioned way of doing things. So our industry, like most others, is changing to more of a DevOps style approach, where we think, design, build, and operate all in one team. Put those people together and get them working together. And the hyperscalers have really shown us the way with this. They have developed a lot of tools and working practices. We've got DevSecOps, we've got Safe Agile, Site Reliability Engineering, we've got microservices and cloud native, we've got containers, we've got serverless technology. All of this stuff exists and is available to our industry to use. But our industry is a little bit different from the hyperscalers in that typically our IT and network estates are built by dozens of different organizations. They've got dozens or hundreds of different moving parts, and that causes problems, because if each of those is independently designed and built, then they're all different from each other in ways that they don't need to be, and that means that we end up with a lot of legacy technical debt, a lot of customized software, which is not pure product because it's changed for each implementation, and we end up with systems and processes which are very hard to unravel. If you want to change something, you make a change in one place, and it takes you quite a long while to even figure out what impact it's going to have somewhere else. So ODA solves that. So the Open Digital Architecture solves it by creating a plug and play set of building blocks. These are the ODA components, which plug into an operational environment. That's the ODA canvas. And that allows the systems and processes to be changed much more easily, like taking Lego bricks apart and putting them together in a different way. That's fundamentally what ODA is about.
So Andy, I think that the point of you know, all those macro trends in the industry that you mentioned there, you know, DevOps, DevSecOps, the move to cloud native, microservice architectures. It's important for us to think about the ODA as not being an alternative to those macro trends. It's a complementary thing that encompasses all those. So as the future of telco operations is becoming more, you know, it's becoming more well defined. We understand now what the next 10 years will look like. This is kind of a blueprint to take all of those things and make them work in a more harmonious way.
It's to make them work, you know, for our industry. You know, our industry needs to go cloud native together. We need to define that, you know, we need to use those techniques and methodologies in the same way. And there's certainly, and that's what ODA has been defining. It's what are the standards we need, what are the deployment practices we need, so that we can all use these new technologies and working methodologies in a similar way, which makes it much easier to maintain them everywhere. So if you're a software vendor, you want to take your products along to each of your operator customers and deploy them in the same way, rather than having to customize them for every different deployment. If you're a system integrator, you want to maintain the standard sort of operating environments that you build and supply to your customers, and not have to customize them, you know, for every deployment. And operators want to benefit from out-of-the-box capabilities that they need, rather than having to, you know, start again with a blank sheet of paper and write all their requirements, and then, you know, get their vendors to meet those, you know, by customizing their software. It's just not something that the industry can afford anymore. That's how we have operated when we had plenty of cash to spare and spend on change requests, but we just don't have that these days.
Yeah. And I think what struck me since I've been at TM Forum is the pragmatic approach of the way that all this is built. I think a lot of people, when you think about standards bodies, you think about this kind of, you know, this idealistic view of how network operations or service operations will work, and to build standards around those without thinking about the messy complexities of reality. And you know, legacy and multi-vendor environments and all the kind of like operational challenges that operators have. And I think that the thing that struck me about the ODA is it's very pragmatic, in so much as it's been built by people who have to make these changes. You know, it's not TM Forum dictating to the industry about how this should be done. This is kind of built by the people who are doing it currently.
Yes, that's a very good point. You know, this is not something developed by TM Forum boffins. This is developed by the industry for the industry. Let's have a look at the people that are involved in it, or the companies and that are involved in it. So share my screen again, and you can see. So these are logos of the 111 organizations which have signed the ODA manifesto, which is essentially a public declaration of commitment to support ODA, both in terms of helping to build it and also to adopt it. But actually, I mean, we've got many more organizations that are involved. We have, I would say, about 50 of these organizations are very actively developing the ODA standards, and by that I mean very heavy involvement. So attending 50 or more project meetings over the last 12 months. You know, so the 50-member organizations have got that level of commitment. Overall, in the last 12 months, we had 250 different member organizations that have been participating in that. And it's all the big names, the companies that you'd expect to see. So for the service providers, the likes of Vodafone, Orange, Deutsche Telekom, TIM, Telenor, NBN Co, Verizon, Telus, BT, China Telecom, China Mobile, NTT, Telstra, STC, Telefonica, all of these companies actively engaged. Equally, the vendor side, Ericsson, Amdocs, IBM, Oracle, Huawei, Netcracker, Nokia, CSG, Sterlite, World Cloud Sienna, very, very good participation. And with the system integrators, the likes of Accenture taking a leading role, for example, in defining the ODA components, which we'll talk about, I guess, in a minute. There's a very, very strong role for system integrators in this picture as well, where some might see this as a way to eliminate systems integration, and in a sense ODA does that. If you can plug and play your Lego blocks, you don't have to spend a ton of money on integration, but that doesn't remove the need for the system integrators. They have a very, very important role in the ODA canvas, which we'll tell you more about in a minute. So the SIs, TCS, HCL, Wipro, Infosys, Tech Mahindra, Comviva, they're all actively engaged in developing the open digital architecture. So it's a real industry initiative. The industry created things for itself to use.
And I guess that's because doing nothing is not an option, and everybody recognizes that.
That's right. It's really come to the point that you can look at it. There's a huge opportunity for us to be much more efficient, to create much better customer experience, to deliver more sustainable systems and processes, to partner more effectively. And that's one of the things the industry has had great issues with. How does especially now with the opportunities of 5G, edge computing, AI, and so on, network slicing, how do CSPs become part of ecosystems to create end-to-end solutions for vertical markets? And if we're all exposing IT and network capabilities in different ways through different interfaces, then it's impossible for other partner companies that are involved in developing end-to-end solutions for global markets to partner with the CSPs. So that aspect of open is a very important word in the open digital architecture, because it's, as much as it is about making our internal systems and processes plug and play, it's also about providing a standard way to interface and integrate externally to ecosystem partners.
I think that lots of the sessions in Copenhagen this year that were based around partner ecosystem or even hyperscaler relationships, they often had an SI guest on the panel too, and that it was kind of this like holy trinity of an operator, a hyperscaler, and an SI. And so, as you were saying, it might seem counterintuitive that the SIs are heavily involved in ODA, but the role that they have, outward from telco is really important, I think, and it's going to become even more important going forward. And that those panel sessions, there were more than one that kind of really hammered home that message. And I didn't really have it fixed in my brain before Copenhagen. That's one of the main things I took away, is that we're so insular as an industry, looking at only within telco operations, and that's probably radically going to change over the next decade. So that that SI role within and without is super important for them to be involved in ODA specification. Yeah,
when we're looking at using these new technologies to create, to help other industries become digital, whether it's smart factories, whether it's healthcare, whether it's smart cities, automotive, all of these things that vertical market solutions, they are for global industries, and the companies that are in prime position to lead those or develop those and take them to market are global companies. That means that our operator members have to federate their services so that they can provide global coverage for connectivity and other things they want to provide as part of that picture. They can do more than just basic connectivity, but it's likely that a system integrator or a large supplier like the likes of the Nokias and Ericssons and so on would be in a better position to take those vertical market solutions to the market. And so how that disrupts the traditional ecosystem that we've had for many years in and that TM Forum has dealt with, which is operators at the top of the food chain buying from system integrators and vendors. Now it can be the other way around.
And what do you think I mean, from that slide of logos that you have there, you got pretty much every large telco IT vendor involved. What was the initial kind of reaction of the vendor community to the concept of the ODA when it first came around?
Well, right at the beginning, there were some misconceptions. There were some people who thought, it was around the time that ONAP was getting very popular, and there were some misconceptions that we might be trying to build open source OSS and BSS to replace their existing business, but there would be clearly no point in doing that at all. We've got a lot of very mature applications, and that just wasn't needed. What was needed was a migration path, both on the vendor side towards compliance with certain standards and principles for plug and play integration, and also on the operator side to evolve the operating environments that they have towards a standard as well. And that's where the ODA canvas comes in. Maybe it's a good point to begin to explain what the components and canvas is all about, Dean. So let me.
Yeah, I think that's probably the part of the story that maybe lots of our audience might not be overly familiar with. So yeah, let's talk about components and canvas.
Let's do that. Okay. Right. So on the left here, we have a representation of an ODA component. This is a software application. So it could be, traditionally an OSS or BSS application, a product catalog, a rating engine, service orchestration, and so on. But actually in this ODA world, it's conceptually, it's any piece of software. It could be a virtualized network function, not defined or really, a TM Forum's business. It could be something defined by 3GPP or whatever. But conceptually, it's just a piece of software which we want to deploy into a cloud environment as a microservices-based sort of plug and play component. That's we call it a component. We represent it by this hexagon. The top green rhombus represents the core function. So if this is a product catalog component, then you'd expect it to have certain essential functions. A product manager must be able to create a new product, attach a price to it, store it in the catalog. So those kinds of things that define the core function. So for a product catalog, typically, you would refer to TM Forum's functional framework, and you would say this set of functions. If the application has all these, then we'd call it a product catalog. If it's PCF or PCRF or something defined by 3GPP, then that's their business to define what that core function is and the interfaces, how it exposes those core functions. In TM Forum's world, OSS and BSS, the open APIs are the way that those core functions are exposed. So the product catalog exposes its core function so that a product manager can use an interface to update their products and offers in the catalog. So that's just the green bit, and that's very analogous to the old TAM, the Telecom Application Map, which TM Forum defined a long while ago and has been used by the industry for a long time, very successfully. It's often used in procurement for a vendor to essentially express what their products do and for the operator to express what they want to buy. So the green part replaces TAM. The open APIs are specified explicitly in the component spec. So it says the core function must expose its capabilities through these open APIs. The other parts of the hexagon relate to operations and management. And this is essentially common to all components. How it handles identity and access management, observability, and other aspects of management and operations. That's common to the way you do it for all components that are plugging into the operational environment. So these relate to how it plugs into the canvas, and the canvas is the other side of it. But this is actually just the current map of the components that have been defined in our collaboration work. There's 56 of them, covering the scope of traditional OSS and BSS, essentially replacing traditional OSS and BSS. So they're grouped together in a more fine-grained microservices-based map than the TAM. But the the components then plug into an execution environment which provides standard services for security, observability, and so on. And so what's very, very different that TM4 is doing recently with ODA is defining this canvas environment, specifying what services it needs to expose towards the components. So and we are working with our operator members to say, well, your execution environment needs to change to match the component specifications. If we're essentially forcing the vendors, or cajoling, encouraging, persuading the vendors to build hexagon-shaped products, then you have to provide hexagon-shaped holes for them to fit into. If you insist on them chiseling off the edges to fit into your square-shaped holes, then you're going to end up with customized software again, which you really don't want. And so this is the canvas is a way of creating some standards that allow that enable the plug and play of the components that work on it. So that's what it's about. To give you a sort of example of how that works, let's take security. One aspect of security is the roles, the identity and access management to the roles. So we mentioned product manager might be one of the roles that has certain privileges with the product catalog component. So as product manager, I may be able to create a product offering for sale in the web shop. As a web shop manager, I need to be able to access that, but I won't have the privileges to change it. So roles and privileges are defined inside the component itself, but who actually has those roles in the company? That's not something you want to maintain independently in every single component. You don't want to list a long list of names and everybody having to log into each component, by a single sign-on or whatever, but independently. You want that to be a service which is maintained and managed by the canvas. So the canvas would have an identity and access management component on it, which would provide that information to every component which needs it. Who's a product manager? What can they do in each of the applications that are sitting on the canvas?
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the never-ending conversation that we have in the analyst community around automation and interoperability in multi-vendor environments, things like this is a way of ensuring that those components have got pre-approved open APIs sat communicating with adjoining components, and that a vendor could map their products to these specifications, to the components, and that would sit inside the canvas and kind of builds that instantly interoperable, fully automated stack. So am I right in thinking that the canvas is code, isn't it? It's real, it's not just specifications, it's real downloadable assets.
It is, that's right. We're not just defining a beautiful blueprint for a 2B architecture and leaving the industry to figure out how to get there. TM4 members are collaborating in what we call our Open Digital Lab environment, which is a hands-on Kubernetes-based environment where they've built a reference implementation of the canvas. Vendor members of that project are deploying their commercial products onto the canvas to prove out the canvas services as they're being defined, and we're also building the tooling and the CTKs and the methodologies that we will use in the future to test and certify both the canvas and the components. So when we get to this point, the vision is that we will have a true plug and play environment, because vendors have certified their components for conformance with the component specifications. Operators have certified their execution environments, and you bring the two together and everything should plug and play. Now, that may be harder than it sounds when I say it like that, and definitely will be, but it will be a lot better than we've had. It'll be much more seamlessly interoperable than we've ever had before in our industry, and that's what we're aiming for. But as I said, it's a journey. Both the specifications are still in flux, still in development. The tooling and the test methodologies and so on are still in development, but we have defined steps towards it. So for example, we have recently launched our ODA component directory, which is an online tool where buyers can find sellers of components. And initially, we've got 47 vendors in there at the moment who've mapped their products onto that ODA component map I showed you with the 56 components on it earlier on. So those are all in there. What we'll be doing very shortly is to introduce into that what we're calling the level 1 conformance towards ODA components, which is checking that the open APIs that are specified in each component have, the vendor has done conformance certification to those open APIs. So that, in the hexagon, you saw the lollipops and sticks sticking out of the edges. Those are the APIs. If a vendor has certified the mandatory APIs that are listed in a component specification, then they've achieved this level 1. It's likely that they will need to get to level 3 or 4 for full plug and play conformance, where other aspects would include, does the component actually, can you actually deploy it onto a canvas and operate it there? Does the commercial product, which might typically be sold as a collection of several components, can you break it out into individual components, each of which is independently deployable? So there's these other tests that we haven't fully specified yet. TM Forum doesn't provide conformance certification for those yet, because we're still in the process of developing exactly how that is going to work and what tools we're going to use. We do have API conformance certification. That's very mature. 55 companies or so have certified open APIs, and we've been doing that for quite a while. But the ODA component conformance is something we will get to in stages.
Mm-hmm. So, and actually, on that note, Andy, can you walk us through where you think we as an industry are at in terms of support for TM Forum open APIs on the one hand, and support for the ODA on the other, and where you think where we are on that journey in terms of, I guess, more than belief in commitment to deploying an ODA?
Yes. Well, let's take it from the point of view of APIs, first of all. We've got, tons of adoption. The industry is, probably in the last 18 months, I think, has really, decided that these TM Forum open APIs are the ones they're going to use for the things they cover. And that's both in terms of vendors who are certifying their open APIs, operators who are insisting on open API conformance in their RFPs. I think your latest research shows that's up around 60% of RFPs insist on open API conformance now. And we've recently introduced the concept of real world API conformance. So rather than a product vendor in their own lab certifying the API and saying, yep, this is available with our product, this actually shows the product is deployed in real life with an operator, and it's working there. It's certified in situ, a real world certification. So we're beginning to see lots of those operators actually deciding for themselves they want to do that. So the likes of Geo, Verizon, Bell Canada, they're all certifying their own API implementations, in-house built or with their system integration partners. So APIs, I think, are now very, very widely adopted, very mature. Every month, 400 different organizations download our API assets consistently every month, 2,300 developers. It's big numbers. ODA is, as a whole, obviously APIs are part of that, as are ETOM and SID and other mature assets. But in terms of actual adoption, a lot of ODA is very, very usable today. And we have member organizations that are very actively using all the bits of ODA that they can. Let me show you a little chart on what we're doing from the CSP side in that. Let's just bring that slide up and share that one. Okay, so what you might have noticed at Digital Transformation World is that we gave some awards to 3 organizations. We said Vodafone, Geo, and Axiata Group are running on ODA. And by running on ODA, what we mean is a set of together with the operator, our CTO office under George Glass has gone through an assessment based on 6 criteria for successful use of ODA. So how well are the ODA principles and rules deployed? Does the organization have skills and competence in the open digital architecture? Has it deployed the open APIs and certified them? Is it working towards ODA components? Is it contributing to the work on developing the components and the canvas? Does it have an agile governance model so that when all this is in place, it can be used effectively? Same thing with the process model. So this is a jointly assessed, jointly agreed set of criteria. And if the member organization, TM Forum operator member, scores highly in those aspects, then those 6 areas, then we designate them as running on ODA and celebrate their success with that. But there are many, many other organizations that are on that journey towards running on ODA. So we've got dozens of case studies, on the TM Forum Inform website. We had numerous case studies in Copenhagen presented. I chaired a couple of sessions where 3 or 4 different operators would each talk about how they're using the open digital architecture and open APIs. So it is being quite widely adopted now by our operator members, but also our vendor members. I mentioned the ODA component directory, and that 47 vendors have already started using ODA components, and they've mapped their commercial products to these components. They're listed in the directory. We're introducing this level 1 conformance, and that's now proving extremely useful. Just today, actually, I got an email from Wiley Wilkins from AT&T. He's their chief enterprise architect. He used the directory recently. It said it enabled him to do an assessment of the capabilities of different vendors in days instead of weeks. So this is something the industry needs to shorten the process of evaluation of vendor products. That's what the vendors want as well as the operators.
And you mentioned, Andy, that we've just done some research on this, and we put out an industry survey in September, October. So there's more than 100 operators, and we asked the question: are you running open APIs in conjunction with the ODA? 29% said yes, they are currently, and 45% yes, they will be doing so soon. They're planning to do so. So that kind of backs up what you say.
Great, good.
I think that just going back slightly, Andy, to that map you showed us of the components, I think that it's interesting from a kind of transitional point of view from the old world OSS BSS to new cloud native, microservice architecture software solutions. That there's some very familiar IT function areas there that you see in the hexagons. And as you said, it's still fairly early doors for ODA, and so maybe there's not 200 components there, but there certainly are all of the core components that you'd expect to be able to do something like concept to cache that you were talking about earlier. You have all of those things that are ready to rock. There are operators using them functionally to build process and do things in real life. So I think that stratified diagram that you had there earlier is a really very simple way to look at what the operational stack will look like, going forward. It's not too wildly dissimilar to what we're used to either. So conceptually, it's not a huge leap, but I think that behind the scenes there are lots of tech things going on that make it significantly different.
Yes, so it's based on the same functional framework that was used with TAM. It's a common functional framework, essentially a long list of functions that OSS and BSS applications need to perform. They're grouped together slightly differently. It's important to get that granularity right, because there's no point in forcing vendors to break their products apart into pieces you would never ever want to deploy separately and independently. So, but at the same time, you don't want them too big so that you end up with inflexibility. and that's been a process that has taken a while to get to that map of 60 or so hexagons representing the 60 independently deployable pieces. But it is still evolving, and as we get to detailed specification of some other parts of it, then it's likely that the exact details will change. But I think we've settled on around the 60 or so components. And then what some of our members were showcasing at DTW was, well, what if those components are not OSS and BSS? What if they're cloud native network functions like PCF or PCRF defined by 3GPP? And they show some very interesting examples. So they're in one demo we had, this is actually Whale Clouds did this one. They deployed the ODA reference canvas onto an Alibaba cloud and onto an AWS cloud, actually the one in our lab, and then they showed how they could take their PCF product and deploy it in exactly the same way on both clouds, which is not something that actually is because you're deploying it on top of the canvas, it's the same deployment. What's underneath the canvas to put the canvas onto that particular cloud environment is abstracted away. That complexity is abstracted away. So the differences between deploying your components on AWS or Alibaba Cloud or Google or wherever, that's all eliminated. You can take the same component, deploy it in exactly the same way on any cloud, and that is true for whether you're dealing with our OSS and BSS components or cloud native network functions. And it's that deployment area, deployment in the cloud, deployment patterns that that's where TM Forum can bring some value to the network side of things. We're not trying to specify PCF and the interface to other network elements. That's 3GPP's business, and we don't want to interfere. But as the network becomes software, then the software skills that we have on the IT side of the industry become very important for understanding how to really deploy and get the maximum value from cloud native networks.
So I suppose operators pursuing a multi-cloud strategy can deploy an instance of the canvas in separate hyperscaler clouds, and then they know that when they come to plug their components in, they have the same environment to go into, and they don't have to worry about any of the underlying complexity. That's right. And here there's potentially opportunity also for the cloud providers themselves, the hyperscale cloud providers, because if they provide an out-of-the-box click to deploy TM Forum compliant canvas, that's a big head start for a system integrator or operator who wants to start to deploy their IT and network workloads onto public cloud. Of course, that would be plug and playable with different components in it, just like the components you put on top. So if you've deployed your Kubernetes environment, we're not specifying how the canvas needs to provide its identity and access management and observability and other services towards the components. We're just saying it needs to provide that. You may choose to use Keycloak for identity and access management, or to use Azure Active Directory as Vodafone does, or to use something different. We use Keycloak open source in our reference environment, but it can be different for others. So, but just being able to provide a starting point, a click to deploy reference canvas onto the cloud platform is something that is attractive to the telecoms industry and will become increasingly attractive to customers, telecoms customers. Yeah, and I think in the next analyst session that we'll have, one of the operators that were designated as running on ODA, and possibly our CTO George Glass, will kind of dig into some more details around the specifics of what those operators are doing, how they're doing it, and take some Q&A around that for the analysts. I think that'll be really interesting. Yeah, they're very, very happy to share, and so we look forward to giving you a chance to ask questions to them.
And Andy, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of the work from members has been done via some of the large operators, so group companies, large national telcos. If you are a small standalone telco in a mid-sized country, how do you look at what's happening with the ODA and assess your readiness of what you'll need to do to be ready to run on ODA?
Well, I guess this is where system integrators become very important, because typically our smaller operator members don't have too much in-house. They'll have the in-house operations teams, but in terms of design and build, they're typically working very closely with partners, system integration partners and software suppliers. So and the canvas in particular is something that a system integrator is probably building and maintaining for their operator customers. So but having said that, I mean, even our big members have small local opcos. So our big group members, whether it's Vodafone or Orange or BT, well, not BT so much, but Telefonica, for example, they typically will have smaller opcos where they try things out and that may be more advanced in some of these areas. So we are working closely with some of those, Telefonica in Germany, not exactly small probably, but a regional opco belonging to Telefonica. These kinds of organizations are directly engaged, and they're typically consuming what comes out. They don't have the resources to do too much building, but they're relying on their system integration partners to bring that expertise, and they're staying able, well informed and able to use what's coming out of the TM Forum projects.
I have a question. We don't have any Q&A from the audience, so if we'll wrap it up shortly. But so if you have any questions, stick them in the Q&A box now, and we'll try and answer those. But I have a quick question, Andy. That's what's next? What's kind of like on the medium-term horizon for development of ODA? Is it to continue to build out components and bring in more members, or is it, what's the plan?
Yeah, the work to define the detailed specifications and test methodology for components and canvas is very active, ongoing work, and that will continue to go on for many months yet to harden it and mature it. But I think the other key areas, we talked a bit about the openness, solving the problem of being too hard to work with. The applications of once you've got this flexibility, what do you do with it? How do you enable new services and growth? How do you work more effectively with partners? How do we move the needle? As our traditional business model gets less and less profitable, selling iPhones and data plans and advanced connectivity to enterprises, how does our industry generate new value? That's what ODA is really designed to do. Zero-touch partnering. We talk about zero-touch integration, zero-touch operations, and zero-touch partnering. And it's actually our Catalyst projects which often pioneer that. So we have many Catalyst projects we just showcased in Copenhagen, another series coming up for our event in Bangkok in March, where the Catalyst projects take ODA and they do things with it, and they demonstrate how interesting things can be done to create new services and new innovation. So that's one area. The other big area is around operations, and in particular AI operations. The Open Digital Architecture is designed to be AI ready, and that's really to do with its data architecture. So how do these, what AI needs in order to operate is real-time data coming off the network and the IT systems in order to analyze it and make decisions. So the data architecture in ODA is designed to support that. But also, once the AI has figured out what to do, it needs to be able to tell those systems and processes to change. It needs to be able to tune the parameters, so closing the loop. And that's also something that is done through TM Forum Open APIs back to the components. So a lot of our work on the applications of ODA is on how do you enable AI operations. Our members have done a lot of work recently on intent-based operations for network optimization, essentially. So managing the network with hands-off, and have published a whole set of assets which build on top of API to showcase how you do that consistently and do that at scale. A lot of work there, which is now becoming very mature. So So I think it's really, once we've figured out the core, it'll be on to how do you really use ODA to change the game.
Yeah, and if anyone anyone's interested, we wrote a report on intent that's on Inform, free to download, and it's kind of includes a lot of the things that are happening around the TM Forum community as well. So we got a question from Mark Mortensen. Hello, Mark. Hope you're well.
Mark?
Is there a requirement that a service mesh be used for inter-microservices communications, or is that left as an implementation decision?
That is left as an implementation decision, but in our reference implementation in our Open Digital Lab, we're using an Istio service mesh, and that's integral to the observability solution. So, so we built it in a particular way to show how it can be done. And I think, if you're in a Kubernetes environment, using a service mesh is a very good idea to manage the the security of the communications between components inside the estate, and then an API gateway for external exposure of the capabilities. And that's what we do in our reference implementation. But as you said in the question, it's actually an implementation decision.
Yeah. Okay, there are no more questions. Is there anything else that we should mention before we wrap up today, Andy, Mark? I think we may have covered it all. So yeah, there'll be more outreach from CC Group around the next few sessions. We're hoping to have some really interesting panelists, people from outside of TM Forum who are using all these assets, and the community at large. Anything that you can think of, analyst guests that you may want answering in between those things happening, get in touch with us. More than happy to chat about those things, and anything that we can support you on for reports and things that you're writing, send you detailed assets to make sure that everything's correct. Get in touch. One thing I said I would mention as well is that there is a TM Forum Digital Transformation World Asia happening in Bangkok on the 14th to 16th of March. So if you cover that region and you're out there, you'll be able to register on the tmforum.org website. So I think we'll wrap it up for today. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.